Hello there, Lunar Squadron, and welcome back to the channel. A few days ago, IGN released a brand new lightsaber combat showcase that featured 4 of the 5 combat stances that will be featured in Jedi Survivor. Now, obviously, it has taken us a few days to get to this breakdown, but that is because we wanted to sit down and put together a very comprehensive and in-depth breakdown of all of this new gameplay instead of just trying to rush and get out a half-baked video the next morning, plus the fact we had the whole IGN Fan Fest content to cover the next day. So we just really wanted to sit down and take our time with this breakdown, and we have done exactly that. We have gone frame by frame through this roughly 3 minutes of gameplay and put together a list of roughly 50 brand new details that we noticed about the lightsaber combat in Jedi Survivor, and we're going to go over all of that and all of these details that we noticed about this gameplay. There's a lot of exciting stuff in this gameplay, but before we do all of that, if you're new to the channel, we would love to have you as always, and the way to do that is just go down below this video, hit that little subscribe button, the bell notification right on next to it. It will notify you every single time that Andreas and I upload the latest and greatest Star Wars and Jedi Survivor content. Now, without further ado, we have a lot to get through, so Andreas, are you ready?
Oh, I'm so ready. There's some great animations in this. We're gonna, chop off some limbs here. We're gonna do it. Let's do it. Now, before we get into our frame-by-frame breakdown, I just want to start off by saying that this segment here, this area in the game, IGN has confirmed that this is not going to be a playable area in-game. It's something that they developed just to demonstrate the combat in Jedi Survivor. I just wanted to clarify that for those of you who are taking this as confirmation of some sort of a horde mode or something like that. That might be in the game, like we had, that wave-based combat area in Fallen Order. It might be in this game, but I wouldn't take this as confirmation of that. This is just a demo here. So without further ado, Nick, you ready to get into this breakdown?
Yep, I sure am. I'm actually happy that you pointed that out, and I am interested to see if we do get some sort of arena mode later on in Jedi Survivor, just like we got for Fallen Order. But the important thing that we are really focusing on here is the gameplay, the lightsaber gameplay, all of the animations, the finishing moves, and all of that stuff, details about the enemies, and we have a lot of stuff to get to. So I just want to start off by pointing some stuff out we noticed immediately off the bat in this opening scene. The first stance that we are dealing with in this gameplay is just the basic single-bladed saber, the very stock stance that will be in this game. And if you notice that the red aura around enemies will signify unblockable attacks. You can see that red aura surrounding that commando droid. This is very similar to what we saw in Fallen Order. This will just mean that the player will have to dodge out of the way of this oncoming attack. And as you kind of scrub through this, Andreas, you will see that that is exactly what the player does in the next few frames of this sequence. He's not able to block this attack. You're going to have to dodge out of the way of these attacks. Now, also, another interesting thing to note about these opening few frames is that this is actually the first time that we are seeing a combination of the commando droids and the Bedlam Raider foot soldiers. Up to this point, we've only seen the Bedlam Raiders with the lesser battle droid companions, the B1s, the B2s, but we've never seen them with this elite squadron of commando droids, which we already know from that article that was released earlier last week by IGN that the commando droids will be amongst the more elite enemies that you will come up across in Jedi Survivor. Now, as we continue to scrub through this opening sequence, we've kind of taken this gameplay and broken it down into sequences where the cut kind of happens in the video, and you'll see throughout the sequence, we get a great look at some of the special attacks that the droid commandos will have. They'll have these very frantic spinning jump attacks that are really cool. You can just tell that these commando droids are going to be a pain to deal with. They're going to be very powerful. They're going to have a lot of ways that they can come at you. And then also, about 2 seconds into the shot, we see Cal attempt to attack the Bedlam Raider, and then we actually see that enemies will be able to parry player attacks, and that will initiate Cal into a stun animation. So the enemy AI will be able to fight back. They will be able to parry you just like you will be able to parry them, which is very cool. So we're seeing a lot of smart decisions and a lot of smart AI enemies here, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. I think this is going to be really cool for this game because it's going to make us pay attention, and this is going to be a theme throughout this combat, is it's a little more involved this time around. It's not so much hack and slash anymore. You're going to have to actually anticipate a lot of attacks throughout this game, and I think it's going to be a bit more of a challenge. I think a lot of us are going to find this a little bit more involving of a combat system in this game. And speaking of paying attention here, we've kind of picked up on this orange reticle in the past. This orange reticle you do see pops up on the torso of the Bedlam Raider, and earlier, Nick, you and I thought that this might have had to do with the blaster stance, because the only time that we had seen it up until that point was in the reveal trailer where Cal had a blaster on his hip. So we thought that the orange reticle was giving the player the go-ahead to use the blaster in connection with his combat sequence. However, what this gameplay and what we've learned recently has revealed is that this orange reticle actually opens up your enemy to a finishing move. That's right, guys. We do think that once you deal a certain amount of damage to an enemy, or once you put an enemy in a compromised position, just like Cal has done here with this Bedlam Raider, you are given the option to commence a finishing move, and he does so here with this really sick animation. And these finishing moves, Nick, they are pretty nasty throughout this trailer, right?
Yeah, they really are. We're going to get a great look at some really cool finishing moves throughout this. And as we progress through this opening sequence against these commando droids, I just want to kind of point a few things out before we move on to the next sequence. And that is, throughout this entire opening sequence, we really get a good look at just how agile the commando droids are going to be in Jedi Survivor. And, you know, it's really hard not to think back to how agile they were in Battlefront 2 and to expect sort of a similar level of frustration when attempting to deal with them in Jedi Survivor. These things look like they're going to be a total pain in the ass to deal with. And we also get a great look at some new animations for the single-bladed combat throughout this sequence here that just kind of show how different it is and how they've evolved the gameplay since Fallen Order. It really feels very smooth, and it really looks like it just all flows together. The animations just really work well together. And then about 10 seconds into this, really the last thing that we get from this opening sequence here is we see the special ability for the single-bladed combat stance, which the devs point out in the original breakdown or showcase from IGN that this is actually one of the special abilities for the single-bladed combat stance, and it is this lunging stab that is very powerful that the devs point out that this is going to be a very powerful attack for Cal to use when he's utilizing this combat stance, which is very cool to get this detail because we see some other animations throughout this gameplay that we think are also special abilities for their specific stances. But it's really cool to see that we're going to be getting stuff like this in Jedi Survivor when it comes to the combat, just kind of taking it to that next level, you know?
Yeah, I think this is a really smooth animation here. Just such a deliberate strike. Reminds me really of the very early combat styles that we saw from the original trilogy that so closely followed Kendo. This just reminds me of kind of a Kendo-like strike here. And then Cal follows that special strike with this kind of backhand strike, and that opens up this commando droid to another finishing move here. We do see, again, guys, this orange reticle pop up, and this is your signal to start the finishing animation. And Nick, this is an animation that we've seen before, isn't it?
Yeah, so here's something that's very interesting and weird about this finishing move. We are dealing currently with the single-bladed combat stance, and this is an important point to point out. We have seen, though, this exact same finishing move before on this exact same enemy type from the Game Awards gameplay trailer that we got, where Cal finishes off that trailer with this finishing move on the commando droids on Kobo. However, when we saw this same finishing move in that trailer, the player was actually using the crossguard combat stance. This means that some of the finishing moves will be utilized by multiple stances on top of each stance, clearly having their own defined unique sets of finishing moves. Very cool. I'm very interested to see what exact finishing moves will be translated across various different combat stances. It makes a lot of sense for there to be a lot of overlap between the crossguard stance and the single-bladed stance. There's just a lot of crossover in the overall look and feel of those stances. Just the crossguard saber will just be a little heavier in the stance, and we'll see that as we progress through this gameplay. Now, we shift gears to this next sequence of gameplay, and in this sequence, we will be dealing with the single-bladed bladed stance, but we will actually be transitioning into the dual wield stance. And one cool thing to note in these opening frames, and something that we have seen before, is that the saber is set up in a double bladed saber configuration, not one hilt on each side. You can see on his hip there that he has it set up to look like a double bladed saber. Now, the player initially will just take one of those hilts for the single-bladed combat stance, and then eventually, as we progress through this sequence, he'll come back later and he'll grab the other hilt when they do indeed transition into that dual-wield combat stance. And this just makes us wonder if this was a choice made by the team over at Respawn, so that it would make the transition between one of these combat stances and the double-bladed combat stance look and feel more natural. And we also wonder about what transitioning from, say, the crossguard to the double-bladed combat stance or one of the other combat stances will look like, because, Andres, we just haven't gotten to see a lot of the crossguard saber stance yet. We will see more of it as we progress through this, but we haven't seen the transition, and we've seen that transition with all of the other various combat stances. But nevertheless, we get a lot of cool stuff here from this sequence, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I've personally been wondering if crossguard double is a thing, or if it's built into any of the animations in this game. So I'm still waiting on that, and that's one of the reasons why I can't wait to just get my hands on the combat system myself. Here, he decides to open up this sequence with this force pull slash. And if you just look at his hip here, you can see that long double blade, it looks like it's going to be a double-bladed saber at first, but he actually opts for the single blade here, swiping with just one of those blades. Then he starts approaching these other B1 battle droids, but as you can see clearly here, Cal still has the other half of his long hilt on his hip here. So you are going to see a bit later that he's going to transition into the dual blade. But first, guys, he decides to use his lightsaber throw. And one thing that I love about the lightsaber throw, look how cleanly it saws this B1 in half. Like, how cool is that? It's still crazy to me how nice this holds up in slow motion, considering that these things aren't, and I just kind of want to tell you guys just to take this with a grain of salt if you're seeing like little things here and there when we're scrubbing through frame by frame, because this game is obviously meant to be played at full speed, but just look at how good that looks at slow motion. It's just pretty cool that it holds up at that speed as well. Then we have Cal sprinting in, and pretty soon, guys, he is going to reach to his hip, and he's actually going to pull out that second saber, and that's really where things get crazy. But first, I personally love this sidestep here, and it makes me wonder what the button combination is to get this little sidestep, because if it is like, just a regular dodge, that'd be pretty cool, but I wonder if you can kind of customize the directions specifically in which you are dodging and doing those sidesteps, because it does seem like placement on the combat field plays a particularly important role in combat in this game, and they actually mention that pretty explicitly with the crossguard stance. So I wonder if you do have a bit more control. Here you can see that he's doing kind of a backwards dodge, so I do wonder if you have a lot of control over that dodging animation. And here, guys, is such a cool moment. It is a moment that a lot of people have been waiting for with Jedi Survivor, guys. If you have heard, they started off developing a dual saber stance for Fallen Order, but never came up with a fully fledged saber stance. But here, Nick, this stance is flourishing throughout this gameplay, right?
Yeah, it really is. You can tell that this was what Respawn really wanted to focus on in terms of gameplay and lightsaber gameplay in Jedi Survivor. And I just want to point out something that happens immediately if you kind of just rewind back to when he transitions into this dual wield combat stance. He immediately parries an attack from a nearby enemy that sends them into a stun animation. And this just gives Cal an immediate upper hand in this sequence of events. He just immediately gains the upper hand with this combat stance, and this is something we'll see throughout this sequence here with the dual wield sabers. It is just apparent immediately how quick the animations are with the dual wield combat stance. The devs mentioned that they approached the dual wield stance to be a much more technical stance that has more nuance to it. They mentioned that this stance allows players to attack faster with access to more unique combos than any of the other stances. This stance is also the only stance where you will be able to dodge out of or guard cancel animations that you initiate. The other stances will force you to commit to the animations of the attack you choose to initiate, and we will see that multiple times with the other stances we get a look at, especially with the double-bladed saber and especially with the crossguard saber. You really will suffer any consequences of the decisions that you make when initiating the animations of the attack. And we will see these features of this new dual wield combat stance throughout this sequence. Now, roughly 32 seconds in to this gameplay sequence, you will see the enemy is able to parry the player's attack, and he actually stuns Cal. However, we see that Cal is quickly able to recover and immediately counter with a parry of his own in the stance and trigger a finishing move opportunity. So even when the enemy is able to counter you and they think they have gotten the upper hand back on you, utilizing this dual wield stance, immediately you're able to recover. And you're able to trigger one of those finishing moves. So this stance is going to be one of the more powerful and fleshed out and just more versatile stances that you will utilize in this entire game, which is very exciting because, honestly, Andreas, I am personally the most excited for the dual wield combat stance in this game. It's definitely the one I think I'm going to be focused on the most. I just really love the concept of having two lightsabers. It's just always been a cool thing to me. It's always something I've gravitated towards in other games when you have the opportunity to utilize dual wield sabers in Star Wars games. Now, one big thing that we are noticing throughout these combat sequences and in previous gameplay that we have gotten is that there's no indication on the HUD of an incoming normal attack. The attacks without the red aura. And you will see this throughout here. We just saw it as Andreas scrubbed through here. Even if that attack comes from behind you, you are not going to get an indication like you do in other games such as God of War Ragnarok or any of those combat-heavy games. Usually you will get an indication of an incoming attack. This means that the player, will need to be cognizant of your surroundings and the locations of enemies at all times. You will need to keep a bearing on where everyone is around you and what's going on around you. You'll just have to be very focused on the combat here. It's not something you can just kind of, half-ass your way through and not really think about. You're going to have to be very focused on the combat here in the gameplay, which is very exciting. Now, we do, roughly 43 seconds in, we do get a great look at the dodge mechanic within this combat stance. This is something, Andreas, that you've pointed out previously going into here, is just how great the dodge looks for these combat stances. And I just kind of wanted to point this one out for the dual wield saber stance, just because it just really shows how fast the attack animations for this stance truly are. Like, I don't know if it's just me, Andreas, but this dual wield stance, this looks incredibly fun. It looks incredibly powerful, and it looks incredibly versatile.
Yeah, it does. I think, like, especially going at full speed here, just how cool this dodge looks. I know when you kind of take it frame by frame, it's funny to me that, like, it actually goes clean through his head here. But when you're looking at full speed, like, how clean is that? Like, I love that so much. And then just roughly leading into the next 5 seconds or so, we again see an enemy parry one of Cal's attacks. But again, it's just super versatile with this combat stance, because we see that Cal is able to immediately recover and then parry the first attack. It really does look like almost like just real choreographed lightsaber combat, and I can't wait to actually get my hands on the controller with this. But it ultimately triggers a finishing move here, which, I mean, I'll just let it kind of play through so you can see the finishing move here. But, like, damn, how cool is that? I'm just still not over the finishing moves just throughout this entire thing, and this is one of those super cool ones. Just a swipe across the legs, and then just how acrobatic is that? It's exactly what you want to see out of a dual saber stance. And then we also get to see just some more awesome animations here. Look at how fluid this is. Like, again, we get one of those awesome finishing moves with the dual sabers here. I'm just gonna kind of like let this play out. Oh my god, how cool is that? It's just so violent. I know that kind of sounds weird, but, like, I just love how violent these finishing moves are, how explosive they are. It just really kind of plays into just how how great Cal has gotten in his last in the time between these two games here. Like he's been drinking the Kool-Aid, hasn't he?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite finishing moves that we get from this entire gameplay out of IGN, just because it really does show how adept of a fighter Cal has become. He sidesteps the enemy in one fluid motion, he pushes him, and then he just slashes him. It just, to me, this really showcases how good of a fighter Cal has become, because it's almost like he's treating this enemy like he's nothing to him. It really reminds me of, obviously, Cal is not Darth Vader, but it just kind of reminds me of how Vader was treating Reva at the end of the Obi-Wan series, where he was just toying with her, and it just feels like Cal is just toying with these enemies with some of these finishing moves. He's just clearly a better fighter, and I love that. Cannot wait for this. It's so great. Now, the next sequence of gameplay, we move on to the double-bladed saber combat stance. And the devs mentioned that this is really the go-to stance for crowd control situations. The point of this stance is for close-ranged attacks. However, the animations do have a tendency to have long startup times, so the player has to be mindful when utilizing this combat stance. This is something that we mentioned just a few minutes ago about how only the dual-wield saber stance will be the stance where you will be able to get out of animations and kind of change your mind on the decisions you make, but the double-bladed saber is not one of those animations. You have to commit and suffer the consequences of whatever you choose to do in your combat. Now, Cal immediately begins this sequence by throwing the double-bladed saber at the group of incoming enemies. However, what is the most interesting thing about this moment is that the saber only hits one of the incoming enemies instead of going through the entire group in kind of that around the world animation like we've seen in the past with the B1 droids and like it was in Jedi Fallen Order. This just makes us wonder if you will have to target individual enemies with a saber throw, even in that double-bladed combat stance, because that appears to be the case, at least in this sequence here. Now, as we progress through, we see that the first instance of the player being punished and betrayed by the long startup time animations of the stance occurs. The player initiates an attack against the Bedlam Raider. However, due to how long this animation takes, the enemy is able to land an attack on Cal before he is able to deal his own damage. As we scrub throughout this sequence, we will see the same situation play out where enemies are able to get attacks in and just deal damage to Cal while he's in the middle of his lengthy attack animations. Now, while they are lengthy, they are very cool animations because the double-bladed saber has probably my favorite overall animation set in this game. I did say that I was really excited to use the dual-wield saber, and that might be my main one, but man, I'm going to have to think long and hard because the double-bladed stance is so damn cool. We see so many cool animations. Now, as this sequence does progress, though, it really doesn't feel like this combat stance is best suited to deal with these Bedlam Raider enemy types. It just doesn't feel like Cal ever has the upper hand on these guys. It feels like the player is taking out a lot more damage and just really struggling more with these enemies than he was when he was utilizing the dual-wield saber while fighting against the Bedlam Raiders. And we've gotten word from the devs in the past where you will have to utilize certain stances against certain enemy types, and certain stances will be better against those particular enemy types. And it just makes me wonder if, in regards to the Bedlam Raiders, Andreas, the dual-wield saber stance will just be better suited to deal with these enemies than the double-bladed saber, because as we progress through to the next sequence of the double-bladed saber combat, we see Cal come up against some scout troopers, and it looks like he's having a lot easier of a time using the double-bladed stance against these enemies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. One thing that I'd like to note about that, Nick, is that these Bedlam Raiders don't really seem to wait for, one Bedlam Raider to finish their turn. Notice how Cal is fighting one Raider here, and that doesn't stop the other ones from kind of poking at him, because he does get a finishing animation here, or he's given the option to take a finishing animation. If you see right here, we're going to get towards it there. You can see the reticle. And then he actually has to start dealing with the other Raiders. He actually gets into combat with this one, and he gets kind of screwed up here. So it is just a interesting observation here that maybe the reason why this stance doesn't really gel well with the Bedlam Raiders is that the double-sided blade isn't the most surgical blade to use. It's not one that that you kind of get to focus on one enemy at a time, and you might need that sort of focus to deal with the Bedlam Raiders. You might have to kind of isolate them and take them out one at a time here, whereas like you said, Nick, this is more of a crowd control stance here, might be better suited for those scout troopers later on, and I think it ends up being the case. And here we get to see a cool animation. I think this might be one of those special moves that you're talking about, Nick, just like that lunge earlier, because you do see that he does this kind of helicopter jump and then down to the Superman landing here. I wonder if you're able to level this up and maybe increase the shockwave or the amount of damage that it does, but how cool is this animation? I just really like this one.
Yeah, it's very cool. Honestly, like I said, the double-bladed saber has so many cool animations in its set, and I agree. I do think that is one of the special abilities, just like that lunging stab attack is for the single-bladed saber. I think we get a look here at one of the special abilities. We just don't have confirmation from the devs in this gameplay sequence that is what this is exactly, but we have a pretty good feeling that looks like a pretty special attack that you're going to have to, save for special circumstances. That doesn't look like something you can spam like some of these other attacks. Now, the gameplay shifts to this next sequence with the double-bladed saber combat that we were talking about, and this time Cal is up against those scout troopers, and as the sequence progresses, you just can see and it feels that this combat stance seems much more effective against this enemy type than it did against those Bedlam Raiders. It just really feels like Cal has more of the upper hand in the sequence utilizing this stance against these scout troopers. And, the scout troopers are most likely a lesser enemy than those Bedlam Raiders. Those Bedlam Raiders look like some pretty hefty guys. They look like some pretty beefy guys that are going to be pretty difficult to deal with. And I just really have the inclination that the dual wield stance is going to be what is used the best against those guys. We saw that in the previous gameplay trailer at the Game Awards. Cal was fighting one of those foot soldiers on Kobo, and he is getting his ass kicked using the single-bladed saber, and he doesn't gain the upper hand on those guys until he pulls out the dual-wield stance. So I really think the dual-wield stance will be very effective against the Bedlam Raiders. Not to say you can't be effective with any of these other stances. It's just it looks more effective than some of the other stances. It's all relative to each other. Now, the first detail that does stand out in this sequence that I think it's very important to point out, Andreas, because it's set the internet ablaze, is that there is a cut off leg sitting on the floor there from a human enemy, which is crazy because as we progress through this, while we do get some pretty sweet attack animations for this double-bladed saber really quick, kind of Darth Maul-ish, this leads to a finishing move opportunity, and then comes the moment that has set the internet on fire. Cal cuts off the leg of the scout trooper, which confirms that there will be some form of dismemberment against human enemies in Jedi Survivor. This was a feature that up to this point was thought to have only been reserved for animal and droid non-human enemies, just like it was in Fallen Order, and this was something that was very contentious for a lot of people leading into this game, was how could you have a lightsaber, a blade of plasma, and not be able to cut people's legs and arms off? How could you only do that against enemies such as droids and animals and not the human-like enemies? It just kind of made the saber feel very weird. It just had a different feel depending on which enemy you were coming up against, but it looks like we will be getting some form of dismemberment with human enemies in this game that will just make the saber feel so much more powerful. Now, next up, Andreas, you just scrubbed through it, is one of my favorite animations from this entire gameplay showcase. And that is where Cal does this spinning behind the back saber attack. And this looks and feels just like that signature Anakin Skywalker move that we see in Episode 3 and other various forms of media with Anakin. Honestly, the double-bladed combat stance as a whole really has featured some of my favorite attack animations out of all of the combat stances that we've gotten up to this point. The double-bladed saber looks freaking awesome.
Yeah, honestly, for me, I'm wondering what I like better right now. Do I like the double blade or the dual wield blade? And honestly, it's kind of hard for me to decide, especially when you start to consider some of these finishing moves here. I don't know about you, Nick, but for me, the double-sided blade finishing move, particularly this one, is so silky smooth. Just the way that he traps this guy on the floor, and then bam, just like back of the hand, clubs him in the head. I love this finishing move. This might be my favorite one so far. I just like the way that it uses some like judo flip in the middle of the move. It's not just like, hack and slash. It just feels like like we're getting into martial arts now. Like, that is so sick. And then kind of struts on him with a totally unnecessary spin at the end. And you kind of see these unnecessary spins every once in a while throughout this trailer, and something that I've kind of been looking out for as well. I do wonder if these are maybe some sort of emotes that we are able to do, or if this is just something that Cal does naturally on his own when he is igniting his lightsaber on and off. But I'm just generally wondering, what this is exactly about. But I mean, as we kind of move into this next segment here, you can just see more of how cool the animations for the double-sided blade are. Man, I can't get over some of this stuff. Like look how free-flowing this thing is. And sometimes, just like you've said, Nick, with this being a crowd control stance, you see that Cal is able to deal damage to multiple troopers. Here you can see that Cal swipes through not just one trooper with this motion, but he actually hits both at the same time. So that's pretty cool. And then we see such a cool animation here as we lead into this segment here. More of that kind of flip thing going on, but here the animation is, look at that. It is a backflip upside down helicopter thing. Nick, how would you even describe this movement? Like yeah, what is? That's so cool. It's just straight out of Darth Maul's playbook, isn't it? That's just kind of what I get out of that. Man, I don't know. Thoughts on this animation, Nick?
No, you're exactly right. As this gameplay sequence progressed with the double-bladed saber, I was getting a ton of Darth Maul vibes. He is just all over the place. He's flipping all over the place. He's twirling his saber all over the place. Just so many cool, silky smooth, just sweet animations. I'm so excited to use this stance. And like you said, he does this weird flip helicopter spin over his head into a lunging attack. Like, this thing is freaking nuts. I don't even have the proper word to call this move or how to describe this. It's just something you have to see. It's freaking crazy what exactly this is. And it's truly one of the craziest animations that we see from this entire gameplay sequence. And then this allows us to then transition into, finally, Andreas, our first extensive look at the crossguard saber combat in Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, it does. So as we're going to start off here, you can see that Cal boots up an animation that is something reminiscent of God of War, how you used to charge up that Leviathan axe throw. It looks like you're able to maybe hold down this animation until you get kind of that flash of light from the lightsaber there, and that's when you can unleash this throw. And how devastating this poor scout trooper. It's just funny to me because I know that a regular lightsaber throw would have been sufficient against the scout trooper probably, but he's just having a bad day at work, this scout trooper is. But one thing that I want to note about this particular animation, and it's pretty on brand for the crossguard saber in general, Nick, these animations are going to take a little bit of time because this is kind of the heavy-hitting combat stance in this game, isn't it? That, like, if you are going to be using this stance, you might want to get a bit of distance between you and your enemy before you start some of these moves, and they did say that you are going to want to pay attention to just how far away from your enemy you are. And here, I think you're going to want quite a bit of distance before you charge up this thing, because look how long that takes.
No, you're exactly right, and that is exactly what the devs said, is that utilizing the crossguard saber stance will allow you to deal significant damage, but you'll also have to be mindful just because you can take on so much damage while you're going through these animations. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out. First off, when you mentioned the God of War and Leviathan axe thing, that was what I initially thought as well, but now just watching it a few times, there's just kind of another thing I've noticed. He kind of reminds me of Godzilla. It's like he's loading up his fire breath, and then he
Cal is Godzilla confirmed.
Well, it's like the same blue, and he has like the blue on his back, and then he just like launches it, and you get this blue plasma explosion. I don't know. He's like Godzilla, dude. He's freaking Godzilla with the crossguard saber confirmed. Now, on a more serious note, there is a detail I do want to point out here that is very cool and very important. Is we finally get confirmation that Purge Troopers will indeed be returning, and they will be a featured enemy in Jedi Survivor. This is very cool. I know this is something, Andreas, that you and I have been wondering. Will Purge Troopers return, because they were so important, such an important element of Jedi Fallen Order, and it was something that Respawn was so proud of because it was a trooper that they had designed for Fallen Order. If you remember, Andreas and I were at Celebration when they announced Fallen Order, and they brought a bunch of people dressed up as Purge Troopers onto the stage because they were just so damn proud of these troopers. And we were just wondering if they were going to be featured in this game because we hadn't seen anything about them. But here we do get confirmation that they will return. And as the sequence progresses, we get a great look at some of the cool animations we'll be seeing for the crossguard saber and just how powerful it is, especially this animation. This one was crazy. Cal does this crazy flying double leg kick. Like, I feel like one flying leg kick would have been fine, but he had to throw in two legs and go over the top. And this
these poor scout troopers.
Yeah, they're getting abused in this gameplay, dude. Like, he just tosses him to the ground. They're getting crossguard sabers thrown at them. They're getting double kicked in the face. They're getting judo tossed to the ground with a double bladed saber. Like, they are being abused. Cal is definitely taking advantage of these.
Can I say something about this kick, please?
Sure.
Is it me, or does this kick literally kill this scout trooper? Like, I think he dies.
Yo, what? That's a great point.
I don't like Cal kicked this guy so hard that he literally died, or he's just like, you know what? Screw this. I am not getting paid enough by the Empire for this, and I'm gonna lay here and pretend to be dead because it's not worth it. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna let him deal with the Purge Trooper here.
You know what? That's a great point, because when I was writing these points down, I really thought he had just stunned him, but I think you're right. I think he is dead, or maybe he's just sleeping. Maybe he's just sleeping. He got knocked out.
He's tuckered out.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, dude. Ewoks were able to kill stormtroopers with rocks and sticks. Who knows? Maybe the kick was powerful enough. It looked like a pretty hard kick to the face. So maybe he did kill him. Maybe he just knocked him out. But next up, we get this very cinematic experience, and I just wanted to point this out because I really love this sequence, where Cal initiates an attack, and the Purge Trooper utilizes his staff to block that attack and pushes Cal back, and then Cal immediately side blocks that incoming attack. And it's just a very cool looking animation sequence. Just kind of, again, points to how cinematic this combat is going to be in Jedi Survivor. I mean, just look at that. It looks like something out of a movie. It's just very well choreographed. It doesn't look very choppy and very hack and slash like we've seen from other sword combat gameplay before from other games. And it was one thing I really loved about Ghost of Tsushima, was just how cinematic the combat felt and looked in that game. It just really helps take gameplay to the next level. Now, a few seconds later, we will see something very cool. Cal will actually switch to a backhanded grip, and he will initiate an upward backhand strike against this Purge Trooper, and then he will immediately switch back to a forehand grip. This was just a small little detail that you can miss very quickly, but Cal will actually be able to switch between a backhand grip and a forehand grip when utilizing the crossguard saber, which is very reminiscent to how Kylo Ren would fight occasionally in the sequel trilogy. It just makes me wonder if there was some sort of inspiration taken from that choreography, that we got from the sequel trilogy, because that is the first time we've ever seen a crossguard saber in the Star Wars universe. So that's just makes me wonder. Now, this sequence progresses throughout, and we just see more of the crossguard saber combat against this Purge Trooper. And we get a great look at just some of those unique animations that will be featured with this combat. And the sequence finishes with a finishing move opportunity, and we get one of the more incredible and awesome finishing moves that will be in this game, and it appears to be unique to this crossguard saber stance. Very cinematic, and you'll see here as we progress through a couple of those unavoidable attacks where you'll have to dodge out of the way, and then we get the finishing move here. The camera angle changes. Cal freaking stabs the Purge Trooper in the chest, very violent, and then to make things even worse for this Purge Trooper and to make the animation even cooler, to get that Purge Trooper off of his saber, instead of just pulling it away like a normal person, he freaking force pushes that Purge Trooper across the room. Just a very violent and a very cool combat stance. Now, the gameplay will shift into this last sequence of gameplay where we are still dealing with the crossguard saber stance. And this time, though, Cal is taking on some commando droids with the crossguard stance. Very similar to what we saw in the Game Awards gameplay trailer. However, we get some more details and some more information here. We see Cal charging 2 commando droids while utilizing a crossbody saber twirl to actually defend himself from the incoming blaster bolts. And there's a few details I want to point out here. First, the commando droids will be able to utilize both blasters for long-range attacks and their vibroblade for close-range attacks, because you can see that commando droid who's running away, kind of like a little bitch while blasting Cal. He has a blaster in one hand and his vibroblade in the other hand, so they'll be able to utilize both. So if you thought they were annoying, it looks like they're going to be even more annoying.
They look so annoying. Look at just the way that he's running across the perimeter like that. That's just such a pain in the ass. Like, you're trying to deal with one of them and then he's just spreading like a little kid. He's just so annoying. Sorry to interject, Nick.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm not looking forward to dealing with the commando droids. You know as much as I do, and anyone who's followed this channel, that the least favorite thing for Battlefront 2 for me was dealing with commando droids. They just drive me insane, so I'm definitely not looking forward to dealing with them in Jedi Survivor. But the second thing I want to point out here from this opening shot is that incoming blaster bolt. It's only visible for a brief second or two, but it appears to be moving a lot faster than the blaster bolts that we've seen in previous gameplay trailers up to this point, which moved much slower, and they also moved very slow in Fallen Order. I'm not sure if this is the case, but it just looks like it's moving faster, and I know this has been a point of contention for many people, was just how slow the blaster bolts have been in this franchise, and how you can just pretty much watch them and just, dodge out of the way, and you can just kind of trail the blaster bolt as it moves away from you, and it just moves really slow. It doesn't move like you would think a blaster bolt would, but to me, it just looks like they're moving a lot faster here, which I know is one thing that some people really wanted to see out of blaster bolts in Jedi Survivor. Now, as this final sequence progresses, it just gives us another great look at the combat animations for the crossguard combat stance, and this time, again, we're just dealing with these commando droid enemies. So many cool animations. There we see a backhanded downward slash. Cal's really going over the top here. Right here you see just how long it's going to take to load up. Cal really has to get his weight behind that attack, which again just shows you're going to have to be very careful about when you utilize attacks with this combat stance, because it will just leave you vulnerable to incoming attacks, especially from quick enemies like the commando droids. It really makes me wonder if this is really the best stance to utilize against these guys. To me, this seems like utilizing something quicker like the dual wield sabers would be much more effective potentially against these quicker enemies, but we have seen up to this point mostly the crossguard stance against these enemies, and he is slashing them apart, so maybe it is the crossguard stance that is the most effective. I'm very interested to find out what is exactly the case when it comes to these commando droids when we get our hands on this game in late April. Now, the last point we want to talk about here is that the gameplay finishes with one last finishing move opportunity and a look at just another unique finishing move for the crossguard saber combat stance. Cal cuts off the head of the commando droid before then cutting the droid in half at the waist, and then to just add insult to injury, he elbow/punches that torso away from him. Just get off of me, commando droid. I want nothing to do with you anymore. Very disrespectful from Cal, which makes me respect Cal even more, because I hate those damn commando droids. So, sick finishing move, Cal.
I do love the little taunt at the end where he's flicking the saber around, and I keep wondering, are these little taunts and lightsaber flicks I wonder if there's different inputs for these, because not all of them does he ignite his saber away. I know this one he does, but earlier with the double-sided blade, you saw he was just kind of doing it for fun. So I'm really curious about that. And just one more thing here. I am wondering if when this strike right here, you can see that Cal is kind of like he strikes this commando droid from the back. Like, the commando droid isn't looking towards him, and it immediately kills the commando droid. I do wonder if hitting enemies from behind deals more damage, maybe. I'm just kind of curious about that. So just more stuff to look out here. I know there's so much to look out for throughout this entire sequence of gameplay. We've really gone through this thing frame by frame. Thanks so much, everyone watching this video, for watching through this entire thing with us. I know that we've spent a lot of time combing through everything, so that said, we've done this together, guys. Let us know in the comments down below if you noticed anything that Nick and I didn't touch on, especially if you have any comments on Cal being Godzilla.
Cal is Godzilla, confirmed. Let's go, baby. Can't wait for that. That's going to be my favorite move now that I've put those two together in my head. I'm going to be Godzilla as Cal Kestis in a Star Wars game. Can't wait. But on a more serious note, Andreas, you're right. Everybody, let us know down below in the comments what your favorite animation, your favorite moment from this gameplay out of IGN was. We really have gotten so much great information about Jedi Survivor over the last week. So much stuff. And that's not going to stop because IGN will be covering Jedi Survivor extensively over the rest of this month as a part of their IGN First program. So there are going to be so many more breakdown videos coming, and we cannot wait for that. So definitely keep an eye on the channel for that. Anyway, guys, that is going to do it for us for this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, we will see you all next time.